I've called this closing keynote Resilience and Collaboration in the Age of Complexity. And I'm hopeful that you will, out of this conversation, leave not just uh, disappointed about the age in which we are living, but a bit optimistic. Um, where we are today, if you think of the world, going back to Newton, they all designed the world based on a lot of simplification. They were trying to understand it. So he did a great job, Newton, when he did his observation, but he didn't go far enough. And so comes Bohr and Einstein and say, hey, your simple equation, Newton, is it's not really the reality of the world. And so Newton came and Einstein and Bohr added some complications with the whole quantum theory. And that changed the assumptions that Newton wasn't wrong, but he didn't have the full picture. He had a simplified version of reality. And the systems we have today that govern the world, most of those systems have been built on a lot of simplified assumptions. And we have this issue where nature is complex. Man have created complex systems, and now we have this collision between nature complexity and man-made complexity. And what do we do with that? We talk a lot about electricity. I listened to my good friend Paula talk about affordability and all of that, which is great. Well, the thing here is electricity is a very complex commodity. It's almost like art, science, all coming together. And this light bulb you're looking at, there's a short story behind the light bulb. So a couple of years ago, I was sitting in the living room, and my boys, I have twin boys, they were 7 at the time, and they were in the back of the room, and they were debating what daddy does for a living. And the conclusion they reached was he just travels around the world and talk. And in truth be told, that's what I do for a living. But the ego that I have as PhD in Royal Academy, you like this, I have to find a better way. So I went back to my staff. I said, look, take everything we do as an industry and try to depict it in a way that I can go back to my boys and explain what I do for a living. And so they came up, Alika and my team came up with this light bulb, which in essence is everything we have to do to keep the lights on. So I get back home after about 2 weeks. I say, hey guys, sit. So I take a real light bulb. I say, you see this bulb? For it to glow, daddy has to know everything that's in the slide. And they're like, wow. So my ego went back up. I felt great. But the irony is I've used this light bulb for the last 3 years all over the world, and almost everyone who sees it asks me for it. Because it depicts the reality of keeping the lights on. It's very complex. But because it's all about a switch that we flip, the average person doesn't understand the complexity behind the light bulb, because we've now simplified to just being a simple flip. You switch it, you flip it, lights come on, everything looks good. But there's a lot of complexity behind it. And take a look at this chart. So on the left, this is how it was a couple of years ago. In some countries, actually, it still is this way in some countries, right?
That's yeah.
And so what happened, the legal system, the regulatory system said, this makes no sense. Let's maybe do something different, and let's come up with this system. Now, here's the problem. Everything that's there is still here. It's just invisible. You don't see it. So the complexity that we saw is now gone. And so we're now like, oh, we have this perfect thing called the grid. There's no complexity. Well, the complexity is still there. The other layer of the complexity is before, these were just wires that created complexity. Now you have legal issues, regulatory issues, policy issues, economic issues. So coming back to the theme of my talk, in the age of complexity, it didn't go away. It just got invisible. And that's something to keep in mind as we go through this conversation. And so this is where you see the man-made complexity is buried, but it's still there. So if you think of the energy system, we hear a lot about the energy transition. Well, the energy transition itself is complex. In fact, it's this set of interdependent forces or factors that we have to take in consideration, and we can't look at them in isolation. But people just say, let's transition the energy system. Well, you just can't transition the energy system like that because it's very complex. And these factors, they're all interdependent, and you can see a long list of all the things that have to happen for us to transition the energy system. So it's not simple. Again, complexity is still there. We don't see it, but it's there. And we have to keep in mind that we cannot simplify the complexity away. And you will see why in a few slides to come. So complexity is the new normal. You've probably heard this before. A lot of people say it. So given my weird mind, I decided, is it really true? So there's something called the World Uncertainty Index. And this index actually is done by the economists to do this measure. Basically what they do is they write the reports, and in the reports, the number of times the word uncertainty shows up, they index it against different things and come up with this very nice graph. And you can see, I'm just showing, this is April 2025 from 1990. And if you go back, you'll see that up until the year 2002, it was pretty steady. There was still uncertainty. So there will always be uncertainty. The question is, when does it spike, right? And so you see here, it looks okay. Then 2002, you saw the lift. Then it went down, get a little stable. 2012, something happened in the world. Uncertainty pops up. And you know what happened here? COVID-19, you see that? And look at 2025. So you can see how it is real. Now they've gone back and sort of checked this against economic developments, economic growth in different parts of the world. And it tracks fairly well in terms of when you see big events happening in the world, you see the World Uncertainty Index spike, which to me says uncertainty is indeed the new normal. It's not going away. It's been there for a while, for a long time, but now it's speaking often, more often than it used to, right? And the question is, what do we do with that information? The fact that all the discussions have been had here so far, I wasn't here, so I don't know what was discussed, but I can imagine there was a lot of certainty in the conversations. In the midst of a world that is very, very uncertain. So what do you do with that world? And when you make these predictions and these proclamations and these plans, but there's uncertainty that's lingering behind you in all your thought process.
A big spike in 2025.
I'll get to that later, David. but he wants to know why the big spike in 2025. I will tell you in 2026, because we may have another spike coming down the road you may not know. But I think we're having these duality of complexities where you have the natural system that's very complex, and you have the man-made system also very complex. And we don't know how to model both. We don't even know how to reconcile both. And the challenge we're having today with both systems, and you have many other systems that are colliding, is that the simplification we keep making about reality creates a lot of problems for us. And you will see a few examples what happens when we oversimplify reality just because we are incapable of dealing with uncertainty. We are fearful of uncertainty because humans don't like uncertainty. So this is a chart, a graph from a good friend, Dr. Masood Amin. He and I were together in Edmonton earlier this week, which shows the interconnectedness of the energy system. I previously said that it's a connected web. We talked about it. But when you say we should transition the energy system, well, what makes up the system? Is it just the wires and pipes? Is it just the utility sector? Is it the oil and gas sector, the telecom sector? Because all of these sectors interact. And so if you only transition one and leave the other, you have a problem. I see Bob G here, and I used to tell Bob, I don't know if you remember this, but I'm always amazed by how we have one view of regulation: electricity regulation, water regulation, telecom regulation. But these are all interconnected systems. So why regulate them in isolation? Why not find a way to do it as an integrated set of regulation? So this is my favorite slide I discovered a couple of years, 2 years ago when I interviewed Don Farmer for his book, Making Sense of Chaos. So this shows the supply chain of a laptop, of a single laptop. Oxford, they did this study. They took this laptop, broke it down, and it shows all the critical minerals that goes into making a single laptop. Now, what fascinates me about this chart, or this image, is that see where the hubs are. So if you, this is China, and you see what's coming out of China. You see the US, you see Europe, and you see different parts of the world. Well, each of these branches, for me, depicts a couple of things: the flow of energy, the flow of money, the flow of human resource. So for me, supply chain, when you look at this, don't think about the critical minerals. I see this as the flow of energy around the world. Because you can't move anything from China without energy. You can't move anything from the US without energy. So energy is embedded in the supply chain. I also see economics is also embedded in the supply chain. So I asked Dawn if his team at Oxford could do a similar thing for a solar panel and a 765 kV substation. And if you start breaking it down, looking at all the components that make up electricity, this map becomes even more complex. So we have complexity there again. So why I'm obsessed over this argument for us to stop simplifying things? Because when you simplify things too much, you create blind spots. If you look back at some of the issues that have occurred, Texas, there were assumptions made regarding the weather. Those were blind spots. The financial crisis in 2008. And most of the things with blind spot is always after the fact that we realize it was a blind spot, because we normally don't design our assumptions with rigidity. Instead, we make it very simple. And then after the fact, we say, oh, wait, we didn't think about this. So we didn't think about it. Something happens. And then we go back and say, oh, wow, there's something wrong with the model. Well, we keep saying something is wrong with the model because we keep simplifying the model, because it helps us to make quick decisions. But there's a risk involved for business. And I was in Edmonton yesterday talking to utility executives. The more you simplify things for any business, you're creating a lot of blind spots. And so as we think about this whole idea of how to deal with the resilience and collaboration, don't simplify reality. And we know why Isaac Newton did it. And Einstein said he was wrong, or he corrected him. So I'm saying here today, because Clint asked me to be provocative, that all your assumptions are wrong. Because all your assumptions, even my assumptions, are based on very simplistic view of reality. Because we dare not ask the hard questions to challenge the assumptions we've been making. So how do we try to fix this? And one thing here is to start thinking about complexity in terms of what I call the plexus. Because again, all of these systems are interconnected. And the plexus here is basically saying they are interwoven. Don't try to isolate them and separate them, because when you do this, you're just creating blind spots. If you design a system and you oversimplify it, you create blind spots. Those blind spots, those interdependencies, they will catch up with you. We've seen it now through different kinds of public policies around the world. Simple policy makes sense, sounds good, but you miss the blind spot, and then you have to come back and fix it. And that takes time. Energy regulation, for example, it's not just about markets. There are a lot of blind spots when you just design markets from an economic standpoint. Someone mentioned Paul Jasko earlier here, or some of the other great economists at MIT or Harvard. And I remember we're doing market design work at Austin, where I worked before, talking to folks at PG and Andy Ott and others, and I would say, I'm not an economist, but I will say something that would upset every economist in this room. It is not a science.
It's a black art.
And we can debate why it's not a science, but it's not a science because there's a clear definition of what is a science. And I say it's not a science because you cannot prove economic theories based on natural observation. You prove it based on assumptions. And what you do is you tweak the numbers until your assumptions are right, and then you say, there I have it. So when you design, Mr. Glover, give me a break. But anyway, so the challenge we have is we talk about markets, but then we forget about the climate. When we talk about technology, we forget about supply chain. We keep simplifying the world. And this is how it says I'm at a law firm, and I did tell my wife I was going to say this. The legal system is one of the most complicated systems that man has created. A good friend of Clint and I, Pierre Bernard, Pierre said, if you give a lawyer 5 rows or 5 sentences of technical specification, David gives it to Clint and tells Clint to write regulation or rules around those 5 things, Clint will give David 800 pages. And the complication that the legal system does is just another layer of the complexity we have to deal with when we talk about transitioning systems. So the plexus, the energy plexus, basically tells us to start looking at all of these interdependencies, all of these systems, and try to figure out how do we deal with them, because we can't deal with them in isolation. So if I went around this room and asked how many people here are from the fashion industry? None. Comfort industry? None. Mining? None. AI? Maybe one of us here, I think he left, Mark. But if I go around and I say energy, everyone will put their hands up. Because again, we have siloed how we run these infrastructure systems, and we don't think of them as plexus. We design them in isolation, and we end up having all kinds of issues going forward. So the energy plexus, how we think about it, is important. So the plexus demands one major thing. We need more polymath and generalists in the world. Because a lot of us are specialists. In fact, I would argue almost everyone in this room would claim to be a specialist in some form or fashion. And it's kind of cool to be a specialist. But in today's world, when you look at the plexus, we need people who have this view of the world that looks at all the interdependencies. One trick question for the group. Who knows, is a frog a specialist or is a bird a specialist? Who wants to give it a shot? A frog, is it a specialist or is it a generalist? It's a 50-50. You can't get it wrong.
50-50, right.
It's a very simplified model.
The bird is a specialist.
A bird is a specialist. Okay, Larry says a bird is a specialist. Who disagrees? Okay, Larry, you're wrong. A bird is a generalist because what birds do, they take a bird's eye view, they fly up and they scan the horizon. Birds can deal with complexity. Frogs, they laser focus on that moth. They're going to eat it. They're going to keep the eye on it and going to grab it, and then they move on. Two other animals, fox and hedgehogs. Who's the generalist and who's the specialist? The fox or the hedgehog?
Fox, the generalist.
The fox is general, yes. Why? Because the fox deals with multiple complex terrains. The hedgehog only knows what it knows. And there's a role for the hedgehog. We know we need hedgehogs in our gardens, whatever. But the fox, he's all over the place. So we need more foxes, we need more generalists to be able to deal with the plexus that we have in front of us. So we cannot keep simplifying. We have to avoid simplification. There's a risk with doing that. How do we do it? How do we manage complexity? Well, two suggestions. One, and I keep going to nature because I wanted to be a biologist when I was in high school. I got a C in biology, and my dad said C meant no Christmas presents. So I got a C, and I said, forget it. I went to do math instead. But I keep going back to nature to learn. And so the dragonfly is the only creature that has a perfect 360-degree vision at all times. It can look in the front, look in the back, look to the left and right. Try catching a dragonfly, it's pretty difficult. Imagine if we as humans could see like dragonflies, that we could anticipate the future, while we're also looking in the back, the rearview mirror, and looking in what's happening now. And that brings us to what I call the need for hindsight, foresight, and insight. We're very good at insight. In fact, we're trained to give opinions. But when it comes to history, when it comes to looking forward, we're not good at that. And the only way we can manage complexity is being able, and uncertainty is to be able to think or to see like a dragonfly. We'll be able to harness at the same time the past, the present, and the future when we're making decisions. So all of this boils down to one thing, the brain. The brain is the perfect gift that were given to us when we're created as human beings, because our brain allows us to do those three things. You do it every time, every day in your life. You're using your hindsight, your foresight, and your insight, but you don't think about it. You don't. When you get up in the morning, the first thing you do, you think about the day. That is you using your foresight. And you think about yesterday. Some of us do, some of us don't. And you think about, what am I going to do now? So yesterday I was in Edmonton, because we did a workshop with ATCO Energy Systems and a couple of other utilities. And this was the word cloud that came out after 2 days deliberation. And what stood out, we had two neuroscientists with us. And what stood out for those folks in the room was brain health. And Jennifer talked about the report or the paper in the publication that I've written, something on brain capital that I recommend you take a look at. But brain health, why is brain health important? So brain capital is one thing we don't talk about. We talk about your blood pressure, but how many people here have a fit brain? Do you think your brain is fit?
Sometimes.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. That's a good point, Mike. We're gonna get back, and I'm gonna tell you why you're partially wrong. Because your brain, it may not be fit as it used to be, but because of neuroplasticity, it can still be fit.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes interesting when we start thinking about brain capital, because the brain helps us in the context of the plexus, imagination, curiosity, creativity. All of those things are tied to the brain. But as you look at complexity, you have to ask yourself the question, am I using my brain to the maximum or am I not? And the kind of things to get good brain health, the first thing is get enough sleep. Second thing, don't drink more than one glass of wine. That was what I was told by my neurologist, who I was with yesterday. But on a serious note, brain health is so important, and it's not mental health. And the distinction has to be made. There are so many neurological disorders that people apply to mental health. But even the perfect person you see walking down the street may think they have a perfectly fit operating brain, but they don't. They have brain fogs. They forget. They're not as creative. They don't have all the emotional skills that your brain allows you to do. So coming back to your question, your point, Mike, this is the thing with the brain. The brain is always developing. When you're born, you have over 100 billion neurons, almost all more than the stars, I was told. But as you get older, what you lose is you lose the ability, because what the neurons are doing, they're making connections. And what you lose is the ability to make connections because your brain becomes static. Complexity should allow you to exercise your brain more so that you can keep your neuroplasticity active. But most of the time, we don't do it because we don't exercise our brain a lot. So Jennifer said, I read a lot of books. It's because I don't want to be like you, Mike. I don't want my brain to ever stop being active. But the only way you can do that is by challenging your brain with complex problems. And as we simplify our reality, we're actually making our brain lazy. And simplification does that. It makes your brain lazy. And it does that because the kids, if you have, some people have kids here, right? One of the things with kids, when they're learning, discover, is that they actually don't know a lot of stuff from the beginning, but they're repeating things so that their brain, without them knowing, is developing all the muscle memory. They're doing that stuff. So the kids, you have skills you don't even know you have because your brain did it for you. So one last point, when people go to sleep at night, you think you're sleeping, right? You get in your room, you bring your cell phone, you put it next to your bed, and you think you're going to bed. Your brain has been trained that whenever that device is next to you, it should not rest. So my good friend Harris, a neuroscientist, said to me, he said, Lawrence, don't take your work phone. In fact, don't take any phone to your bedroom because your brain understands the phone as something it will be waiting for a signal. So you might be sleeping, but your brain is not resting. And when your brain doesn't rest, your neuroplasticity, Mike, goes down. And so it's hard to think about it. Another thing Harris said, how many minutes do you spend in front of the laptop?
Too many.
Too many.
I know. And then you were to pick a number. On average, you shouldn't spend more than 20 minutes, 20 minutes, consecutively in front of the laptop. Because after 20 minutes, the brain needs a break. And this is where it becomes very interesting. There was a study done in London where they took the London cab drivers. These are older gentlemen, most of them, in their 50s, cab drivers. They actually had to memorize that handbook. And they did a study of their brain afterwards. And they discovered that the hippocampus had gotten stronger and bigger after going through that process. So what is the GPS doing to us? It is making our brain ineffective because we're not exercising. The hippocampus is not working. We're not developing new tools for the brain. Everything is so simple. The brain is not working. So we have a simplified world, yeah, but the brain is not working. So if the brain doesn't work, you can't manage complexity. You cannot manage all the things you should manage because your brain now has become atrophied because of simplification. And simplification is not good for the brain. The brain doesn't like things simple because then it cannot work.
So AI is going to make us stupid.
I was going to get there, but you did before I did.
No. But how do I get home?
How did you get home before? I mean, if you go back to people who the hunter-gatherers in the past, how did they find their way around? They didn't have a
We had these
GPS.
things that you open.
No. They didn't even have anything because
Key maps.
guess what? They had to remember. They had to remember. Now, when you drive with your kids in the car and you ask them, "Did you see what we just passed?" No, they don't remember. They can't even remember like 5 minutes ago. It is a serious crisis for us, for the world, for the energy transition, because the thing is, we're simplifying these things, and by simplification, our brain is not getting the training it needs. So I'll soon be done. But here's the thing. So this is a slide I got from Dr. Laura Janet, pediatrician, also neurologist who was there yesterday. And it shows here the rate of return when you invest in human capital. What is interesting, and I show this because, and I'll come back to you, Mike, because it's now shown that if you start investing in kids' early childhood development, the return on investment is very, very high. The science have now shown that if you invest in these kids' brain from the time they were born and give them the right environment, their brain gets great. And it also shows that the better childhood brain development they have, when they get to Mike's age, their brain is going to still be healthy because it will depreciate exponentially over time, right? Now, what happens is because the brain can always be trained, when you get here, you can still train your brain. Now, it will go slower. So you won't learn as quickly as you did when you were 20 years old, but you can still learn just like those cab drivers in London did. Okay? So we need a call to action when we talk about the workforce of the world. We talk about the energy transition. It all comes down to the brain. And I wasn't this passionate about the brain until I had a conversation with Harris, Dr. Ayer, and he and I were talking. My daughter was listening to the call, and Harris was telling me all the things you should not do to have negative brain capital. And as she listened to the call, the moment the call ended, she came to me and said, "Daddy, you have a very negative brain capital." Because she listened to the whole
Brain
conversation. I
cavity.
said, "Why?" "Well, you got 2 cell phones in the bedroom. You don't go to bed until after 11 o'clock." And she listed all the things that I was doing, and she was right. So your brain is the only instrument you have. If you don't take care of it, if you don't take, now they're even showing that dementia, which is a huge problem, is because we are not managing our brains properly. We're not investing in brain health as we should. And the workforce for the energy industry needs to now step back and say, look, all HR policies might work, but do you have a healthy brain environment for your workers? Do your workers have brain breaks? Do your workers have the right to even just walk away from the desk and just idle? Because the brain needs to break. And it's been shown that the more rest you give the brain, the more productive you are. So working for 8 hours a day and producing nothing but getting paid, what's the good in that? I'd rather work for 2 hours, rest my brain, and come back and be productive. It requires rethinking. It requires transitioning how we do work, even for the industry. So Dr. Laura Jenner, and her book is going to be coming out soon, and this is why I'm so fascinated by the whole thing with the brain, because she's now said, everything in the body flows because of energy. Your brain works because of energy. And as an energy person, we should be happy to know that the brain and the energy system, they're linked together, right? And the neurons are like, things, the grid, and all the other things we connect. And so the more we start thinking about the brain in the context of energy, it's easier for us to understand. So she's developed these things she called the key skills. Not like key Y, but it was supposed to be G, but basically she used key. And it's these 6 skills, the me, we, why, or 7, me, we, why, will, wiggle, wobble, what if. These are the skills she thinks we need to really develop the soft cognitive skills we need for our brain to remain very active throughout our lives. So Dr. Jenner works with kids. The other doctor I was with, Dr. Mangat, she worked with folks who have dementia. What is interesting, both groups have one thing in common. They all benefit from soft skills. And so the question is, when you develop your workforce for the future, are you developing them based on their hard skills, their calculus, their physics, or are you looking at their soft skills? because the soft skill is what's going to help their brain in the long term. Hard skills are important, but when it comes to brain neuroplasticity, hard skills are important. So let's talk about collaboration. Collaboration requires trust. Trust is tied to the brain. Now, if I ask you this question, it's a trick question, so be careful how you answer. Okay? The person you're married to, do you trust them? Don't answer me. Just keep it to yourself. Don't tell me the answer. Larry, don't answer the question. Paul is here, right? Okay. So, but here's the reason, right? The reason why you might trust that person is tied back to your brain, because there is a certain chemical that your brain puts out when it's excited because it trusts the next person. Collaboration is all about trust. And given where we are as a world, given where we are as a community, all the things that are going on, it boils down to the fact that our brains are not healthy enough to understand how to trust people. We don't have the soft skills we need to trust people. We spend so much time focusing on the hard skills, but the soft skills, empathy, smiles, just showing some generosity. These things, and the reason why they're important, because those are the things that trigger positive signals in the brain. You know, when you get on the train and someone says, "Good morning," how does it make you feel? Make you feel good. Can you imagine if we just frown at you? You're like, everybody's like frown and upset, right? Because you're sending negative signals to the brain, and the brain hates negative signals. And for trust to be built, we need to start thinking about, how do I send a positive signal? If you think back through all your life, the people you trusted most, and you analyze why you trusted them, you will realize it was because they did something that was almost like a soft skill. Maybe it was a hug, a smile. Maybe they did, but there's always something that science have shown that points to these soft skills. They're not the hard skills. No one trusts me because I'm a PhD or no. They might trust you because you're a kind human being, kindness, because you have empathy. That's why people trust. So rebuilding trust, having the positive brain capital we need, is to not forget about your hard skills, but start asking yourself, am I a gentle person? Do I have empathy? Do I have all the different skills that we have here? Social awareness. These things are the things that trigger positive signals in the brain and allows the brain to then allow you to trust another person. Two more slides there. So we've been talking about designing resilient system. And I said we should design systems worthy of the world we live in today and tomorrow. And that's where the foresight comes in, because oftentimes when we sit in rooms like this and we decide to have discussions about the world, we forget that it's not our world. 20 years from now, some of us may not be around. Some of us may be around, but like Mike said, may have forgotten half of the stuff we've learned. But as the next generation, and what's happening to the world today, the next generation is actually having even a more difficult time with their brain health, because they have inherited a very simplified world. They're not developing their brain because everything is one click away. And because of that, we're headed to a collision where all these brilliant baby boomers, Gen Zers will have a problem, because when they meet the younger generation, their brain is not developing with the skills that it should. I have a friend. I don't meet the friend. I call it a friend. But it's someone on Facebook who I will never meet. That's not my definition of a friend. For Clint, a friend is somebody I can hold, touch, shake their hand. For the younger generation, a friend is 25,000 people who I will never meet. So the concept of a friend, of friendship, has changed. So how can you have international collaboration when the person who is your friend, you have never met them, you will never see them, but you call them your friend? And that's why thinking about the future is going to be so important. The danger, the world is going to get more complex. It's not going to get less. And if we keep simplifying the world, we will keep creating blind spots for us that will come back to haunt us. And it all boils down to one thing: uncertainty. Humans hate uncertainty. Not the brain. There's a distinction. Humans hate uncertainty. Your brain loves complexity. So don't go and watch any boring, trivial soap opera. Go and watch something about quantum physics. You may not understand it, but your brain will be happy. When people tell you, "Oh, you're such a brainiac," I love to be a brainiac because I will live My brain will be healthy, and you keep reading your, comic books, fine. But at the end of the day, your brain needs that pulse, that injection of complexity for it to prosper. And you keep giving it simple stuff. You keep using your cell phone. ChatGPT, you mentioned the AI. Let's talk briefly ChatGPT, right? How many people have used ChatGPT? Be honest.
Most
Great.
of us.
Okay. I've used it too. It's very dumb. Okay? And the reason I know it's dumb, try to insult ChatGPT by telling ChatGPT you're stupid. Just tell ChatGPT, you are stupid. It doesn't know how to respond to that because it was designed and trained to give you answers to make you feel good. So if you insult ChatGPT, it's not going to insult you back. It may tell you, "What do you mean I'm stupid, Lawrence?" But if so, the problem is that thing is only as good as what's going in, and what's going in is something that we're giving it, and we're only giving it things to give the response we want. So I'm very concerned that AI is not only going to make us as a society, as a world, dumber, it's going to create more risk because it's going to simplify things to the point where people won't even need to think anymore. So then how is that brain of Mike going to develop if you're not thinking? If ChatGPT solves your problem? Thank you.